Hello guys, here's Joe990 and I will be bringing you kind of like a new series that I want to do with my old 500 Zoom hands that I played back in 2021. I think most of them was played 2021 in this time frame, and yeah, I found some very interesting hands and I will go over them video by video, and I will also put a lot of effort in finding some concepts, analyzing them in Pio, and yeah, just filtering out some cool concepts that I can find out. My goal is always to use Pio to find out exploits that we can implement in our game, and also like overall GTO understanding, so that we start being able to solve spots in yeah, while you play, and not you don't have the need to memorize every spot. This is like my big goal always. So I will just show you how I approach this. First of all, the hand. I picked that one as my first hand that we will analyze together. It was yeah, deep, 300 big blinds deep. So I open in the cutoff button. Yeah, standard rec. It had only 600 hands on him. You don't see the HUD now, but he's 20. He's playing VPIP 23, PFR 18, 3-bet 6 on 600 hands. Not too much sample, so I wouldn't go too crazy with the assumptions. But the 3-bet is a bit low for that sample, let's say. So I would speak a bit for the more passive side. Okay, and this will be interesting in a later point when we go over a concept that I want to show. Okay, so 3-bet we call. I think it's an easy call, 300 big blinds deep. So on that flop, yeah, very interesting flop. Back then, I don't know, of course I cannot fully remember what I was thinking at the time. I'm pretty sure I was aware of like donking, when to donk, when to not donk. So I'm not totally sure why I didn't donk there. It seems to me like a pretty obvious donking opportunity, because we have a big nutted advantage in a deep spot. Normally, that's like the first thing that you can take away is deeper you get, more important the nutted advantage gets, because if we think about villain's range, where has villain his big advantage over us is like aces, kings, queens region, and by increasing the pot size, so the stack to pot ratio, they become less and less, they have less and less EV, and the EV of like this nutted hands like trips increase, of course, because at certain point, I think when the point is reached where aces and kings and queens are not comfortable stacking off anymore all the money, then I think we have a point where we want to donk quite a bit and take full advantage of our nut advantage. So villain doesn't have 6s, 4s, we have them. 8s, probably yes, but we need to also consider here, I don't know if I did it back then, but all the hands are even less likely in this range, even 8s, because we have a fish behind. Okay, he has only 10 big blinds, but if the fish would be, I don't know, like 50 big blinds, then he would have a high incentive to just call his suited connectors, his 8s, his 6s, that he would 3-bet 8s high frequency, 6s low frequency. He would all call probably. So that factor would be also very important in my estimation, or like in the choice of strategy that I use, I think. So that's also one thing to take away, is to really pay attention to the details, especially when you play such a big, when you're 300 big blinds deep. Any bit of information can bring you a lot of EV and make you play the hand in a much better way. Uh, that's of course not possible when you play too many tables. That's why I'm not the biggest fan of playing too many tables. Back then I was playing 3 tables Zoom. I was long time playing 4 tables Zoom. Again, a takeaway is because I noticed when I didn't force myself to play so much volume, somehow I just like thinking of or this pressure of reaching a certain amount of hands every month to feel like I did enough. So yeah, like I would recommend to not focus so much on volume and really focus hard on win rate and maximizing your EV in every spot. So if you have 2 Zoom tables and you manage to make like a double amount of win rate, I think the variance should be lower than like playing 4 tables Zoom and going for a high volume. Yeah, I think higher win rate is always better and it's more fun. For example, you can think much more deeply into things, and you can ask yourself questions. You can improve so much more when you play less volume. This high volume grind is really hindering like players to grow. I think it was in my case, and I think I see it also in a lot of my students. I always give the advice to play low volume, not too low. Of course, you need to be able to make money, but yeah, don't overdo it with volume. So okay, back to the end. So nowadays I would donk. I don't know why I didn't donk here. Maybe I read that he's c-betting too wide, but or I just missed it. Can everything be? So yeah, so he bets 3/4, which is very interesting. Normally we see like a half pot size. If he would have aces, kings, queens, I don't think people are comfortably betting 3/4 in a board, 300 big blinds deep, where they have such a nut disadvantage. So there could be the factor of him just missing that we are 300 big blinds deep. It's always a thing. So also what I would consider always when I play deep is the factor that people miss that they are deep. Happens to myself quite like sometimes that I play a spot as I would be 100 big blinds deep, not realizing that we are 300 big blinds deep, and then villain could potentially exploit that fact. He can just put much more pressure on me with his nutted regen. Yes. So okay, so I decided to check, and I decided to check raise, which I like. I don't like check calling too much. Yeah, just the fact that I just want to build a pot, and I don't think people are too crazy about triple barreling. And if he sizes up, he's already showing he's quite strong. So yeah, I just want to put like already build a pot. A bit I was concerned, like we could be concerned about eights, but eights are like not betting also 3/4, I think. Yeah, so raising small, which is fine, I think. Even smaller makes sense because we want to still check raise 9s, 10s for protection, 8, 7, this kind of hands. But probably in game I wouldn't do it too much because yeah, there's a bit of a sizing tell, I would say, or I think in game. Yeah, so turn comes the deuce, so brick doesn't change much. I would guess now we have 2 sizings. When we are shallow, like shallow stacked, deeper, probably it changes a bit. So 100 big blinds deep, I would have here some block bets, but then I would need to put also some of my 4s, 6s, 8s into the block bet to balance out things. And I don't think that's a great thing to do against, yeah, mostly more. Yeah, I think people react quite passive here, not raising so much. So I think we lose out quite a bit of EV if we go for a block bet. So if we can never block bet, our block sizing would be quite attackable, I would say, or think. So yeah, I think against passive opponents, totally fine to block here 10s, jacks again. And then we could do some fancy stuff like re-raising or doing something like more out of line things to really put pressure on his kind of kept range here because we still have 4 6s. Even if we don't play it like this, he doesn't know. I decided to overbet slightly, which is totally fine, I think. So yeah, to polarize in a way that we get it in on the river. Pot size would be also fine. I think I would like pot size now more because the slight overbet just looks quite nutty, and yeah, pot size does the job. Even if we bet 3/4, he will have a pot size almost behind. So I don't like. Theoretically, maybe it's fine, but like I don't like it practically. The sizing. I think we generate too much fold equity there. And river, not the greatest one because yeah, aces is a big part of his range, and kings, queens, jacks are now less incentivized to call. But on the other side, we don't have too many ace-x here, so he shouldn't be too afraid. But anyway, it's a like kind of scare card, so he's less incentivized to call us down. But yeah, anyway, I go for the clear shove. Check would be a terrible mistake, I think, a huge mistake. And he called with 8-7, which is on the first side seems like a spew or a punt, but I kind of like it. I like this call much more than like jacks or queens, because we wrap very polar in spots where you wrap very polar, the nut like the nut blocker or like the blocker effect is very very important. So yeah, like him blocking 8s and 7-5. 7-5 I can even have sometimes with the fish there, and somehow I can turn up with 7-5 300 big blinds deep, or some players that are looser. So blocking that is for sure not a bad thing. So yeah, he blocks 8s. He has some good equity, that's why he bets. I think his bet flop and call down is not the worst, and it shows really that he's not afraid of stacking off, let's say, and this is never a bad thing, I guess. I think it's worse if you're afraid to lose your stake than, of course, to be not on the. You will be sometimes on the spewy side if you're on that side, but you will also be better in protecting your equity, like realizing your equity when you're able to be more aggro than the villain. If you're if you don't mind getting your stake in, or your opponent is more afraid to get his stake in, you will always have a advantage in equity realization. I think it's a big, like a mental thing probably also. Okay, so that's the hand. Then I will show you the my sims. I prepared them. This is the hand in 3 different big blind format, like big blind scenarios, or deepness scenarios. So we have 300, 200, and 100 big blinds deep. Why I do this? Why I don't solve only for 300 big blinds deep, just for our hand, is because I ask myself always, like, in which way can I study the hand that I get maximum benefits, or like maximum value out of it. If I would just look at this solution, let's say this very simple way would be just to solve this, then this 300 big blinds, I will say okay, 50% donk. I thought okay, maybe a bit more. Okay, so then you look at the range, you see okay, everything can mix, great. So you check, and then he bets, but he bets like 3/4, not half pot. So maybe you rerun the sim if you don't, like, sometimes you don't want to rerun, and then you just look at the half pot, and then you say okay, I could re-raise, I could not re-raise. So this kind of thing, because mostly you have mix after mix after mix, and you don't get anything out of this kind of study, I would think so. So I like to study, or like teach my students other study method, and yeah, this I train with my students always, is to study more efficient. I think that's very important, especially with the new tools that come out now with GTO Wizard AI. I think this will give you a big edge if you are able to study more efficient than your opponents. So I make 3 sims to compare. Comparing gives me more more possibilities, let's say, to try out things, to get a better understanding, to yeah. For example, let's just make an example here. We see 100 big blinds, 85 dong, 223, and then 300 again 55. So that's a weird thing. Like, it's not intuitive that this kind of things happen. Often you will find unintuitive things, which is great because there are great opportunities to learn something. So here I ask myself first, why we donk so much on 100 but not deeper? So like deeper, why deeper less than 100? Because intuitively we would think, or my thought was before I studied, was okay, like we have nut advantage, and nut advantage, the value of nut advantage goes up with big blinds, or like the stack to pot ratio. When stack to pot ratio is bigger, my nut advantage goes up, therefore my overall EV should be higher, let's say. The interesting thing is that in position has a much less EV than like 100 big blinds than 200 big blinds, which so yeah, like the thing is 100 big blinds is better for us as out of position, which is again unintuitive, I would think. And then you can ask yourself, now you have like a problem, and now you can solve a problem. You go on the thing like the problem like a kind of like a scientist. I like to do it always, to approach it. So to ask yourself smart questions and then explore. And there, with that, you get a much better understanding, let's say, than just trying to memorize one solution. Doesn't bring nothing, I think. So, okay, we donk a lot here. Why is that? First of all, we have different ranges. So first of all, we need to always start with pre-flop ranges. There is often an answer to be found. Let's see. Let's compare 200 and 100 should be enough to get this concept clear. So, in position range is the interesting part. Interesting part is in position range. Where's the big difference? Maybe you can stop. You can look at these 2 ranges, stop the video, and guess why it is better to donk on this, or like why we have a higher EV on that, in that scenario with that ranges, than in this scenario with that ranges. So okay, so I will show you now. Here's the big part, the off-suited region. We have a bit more king 10 off, a bit like much more ace 10 off. So the big thing that happens is, as soon we get deeper, we stop 3-betting so polar hands like ace 10 off, and we go more into the region of like suited aces, pocket pairs, this kind of region. So it makes sense that we then yeah, in position will hit more often sets, will more often less often have Broadway air. So like that, if you think about ranges, if you're very good in understanding ranges, how they interact with flops, we can guess the strategy on the flop. We can make estimations like this. You can get in a scenario, you are 300 big blinds deep and you think about ranges, and you get an intuitive understanding of what is the strategy. You don't need to solve it, but it takes of course a lot of like training, let's say, to get this done. But yeah, with time you will be better and better in this, and it's very fun to do because you get a deeper and deeper understanding. Okay, so we donk more, fine. That's the first thing, first takeaway. Deeper is not actually better for out of position, so it's about range construction. Offsuit combos are very make a big difference, so we need to always consider the offsuit combos also, like first, let's say, if we think about ranges. Okay, so then let's go to our spot. I think I want to keep this video not too long, We can make probably two parts of that hand because I can find out quite a bit, I think, here, and to show you some more concepts, but let's keep it with the 300 big blinds for now. So this is the solution with 55% donk. Now the question is, if we just learn this, or we don't second guess what is maybe, we can ask ourselves different questions to get a clearer understanding what is, because this is Pio and we want to play optimal against a human, so we need to kind of adjust things, I would say, and to get a better understanding of exploitive play, we need to node block and to ask good questions. So first of all, or a big thing is also simplification. We don't want to make it too complicated. So the best case scenario is to find out a simple and effective strategy that maximize the maximal exploits the opponent, let's say, for the simplicity. We can give up EV in like exploit EV in when it's more simple to play for us, especially out of position. That's also a takeaway. Is out of position, like the factor of simplicity is very, very important in my opinion. In position, you can make it a bit more tricky, especially to put your opponent into trickier spots, because out of position it's much more likely that you make mistakes and deviate from Pio. Therefore, your equity realization is much lower out of position compared to already against in position, but compared to GTO it's even much lower. We need to consider this. Okay, so we have 55% donk. What can we do now? We can look at the reaction of imposition. So we have this reaction. We see 33% raise, which is a lot. Especially, I would think 100 big blinds deep, it's more likely that you face raises and aggression, because people are not so afraid getting it in with aces, kings, queens. But deeper we get, more passive players become normally, more tighter they get. And they don't want to build up pots with this kind of hands anymore so often. So they often just call aces, kings, hands that don't need protection and don't want to build a huge pot. They just call. Most people don't mix too much, and they overfold to this donk. You see, like this king check clubs starts calling. All this backdoor stuff, ace 10 clubs, ace jack clubs. They will not raise so often the backdoor draws. They will not raise ace queen offsuit, ace king offsuit. So I made a node log where I just took out everything very intuitive. Also a tip is to not go too crazy, too extreme with your node logs. So don't go ahead and don't make extreme estimations, or you can make, you need to kind of assumptions. You need to make assumptions kind of in poker to be able to exploit, of course. Best case scenario is you have MDA data that I also give in my my students. They will receive MDA data to specific lines and scenarios, but sometimes you just have that data, so you stick. You need to kind of stick to GTO and your assumptions and to your experience. There we need to be careful. Our assumptions can be always biased by the negative, like by our past experience. So if you are at the moment in the downswing and face you see always nuts like from the opponents, your assumptions will be biased. You need to be aware of that to make better assumptions. So I would say make slight assumptions, or like slight adjustments, nothing too crazy. If we take out king check clubs, it's not too crazy. I think it's a very reasonable node block. Or if we instead of like taking out, I don't know, queen check and hearts with the backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight, that would be an extreme one. um, which I would not like. Or something like to take out ace king always, for example, to always fold it. Saying people are tight, they fold always. It's too extreme, this kind of things. So, but I'm pretty sure they don't raise ace king, ace queen, so I just take out the raise. Or aces, kings, queens, I don't take out fully the raise. I go down 10%, 20%. This slight changes already can affect our strategy very significant. And if you make it like more subtle the changes, you get a better feeling how to adjust. Because if you make always extreme things, you get extreme outputs, and you never get like this feeling of like or this understanding how the solver is exploiting and how much and with which combos. If you just see always raise, always call, always raise, you don't see blocker effects, what it wants to block, where the EV is higher, lower, just goes crazy with too crazy exploit node locks. Okay, that was yeah, to the node locking. So let's see. I will pull up the spot with the node lock. Okay, so we see now we have the full range down, which I think is a very nice strategy to play, especially against very passive player that and this or like very good players also that are aware of the fact that they're having a big nutted advantage disadvantage, so therefore they will check back much more often. Let's say here when we check to them, they need to check only 50%, 25% here, the overpairs. I think passive and aware players kinda they will end up checking too much. Then there are players that are also like they're just not aware of the fact that they're deep, or they don't pay attention, they're more on the weaker side, but also passive, but they just bet their aces, kings, queens. So it kind of depends on how strong you think your opponent is, how aware he is, and because if he's not aware, you want to check raise, of course, putting more money into the pot when you have a made hand, and putting more pressure on villain if you have a bluff, kind of like 6-5, 4-5, make great check raises with high equity and good blockers. Okay, so just to make the music a bit quieter. Okay, let's move on with the hand. So 8-6-4 rainbow. So we donk 100%. Now, very simple strategy now. We don't need to mix. We don't need to think about much things. We can adjust to the opponent. Like I said, if you have certain tendencies, with these tendencies and assumptions, we know then the reaction that we should like the action that we should use, which we think is the highest EV against a specific opponent, which is the optimal exploit, let's say. Like you trying to really adjust to your opponent, not to the pool or something like this. But of course, this is not always possible because you don't have always the reads on your opponent, especially when you play anonymous pools. You cannot go with this kind of things. So I would just donk it, and yeah, here you see my node lock, just less racing overall, more passive actions. Even I leave him even this ace queen, ace jack, ace this clubs in there. So really passive, not too crazy. The raise, the node lock. Ace queen can also easily just fold already on the flop. So from passive players. So I think it's a nice nice node lock, not too crazy. And then we see how to continue turn. This is a big thing also. So if you look into a hand, you need to. That's a big like disclaimer, let's say, is don't just study the flop and have no clue what you do on turns and rivers. You don't need to go too deep, but in general to know what are you doing on an ace turn, on a 7 turn, on which cards are good for you, bad for you, what do you do on a good card, on a bad card. Develop understanding what you're doing, because you're out of position and you can throw away your EV again on the turn. Don't forget about this. The pot is quite big already, so if we bet a wrong hand, we can easily spew off the money that we make on the flop. We can spew off then on the turn and river. So we don't call, and now let's say, or let's say how to react versus a raise. Let's say if he raises small, I would imagine our Jack 10 in hearts and diamonds, our Queen Jack, they get close. If he raises, if he's a good player and chooses a smaller sizing, because he should think which kinds of hands he wants to get value from and making different kinda. So if he makes a 50% raise sizing in position, then he gives my backdoor broadways an easy way out. It's too big for us to do, then for me to do something. Even my 10s, jacks get into a shitty spot, then start to fold, I think, already. So if you want to re-raise queens, jacks, and you re-raise with a big sizing, you kinda, yeah, you don't do yourself a favor with that. Here we can ask ourselves from which part do we want kinda value and protect equity, and that's mostly the Broadway, my backdoor broadways that I want to check raise on the flop, or like, yeah, in general, like the backdoor broadways, stuff like this. Ace highs, so raise small, and then we see Queen Jack gets close. So look also at your close hands, that you know how to put the villain into a tough spot, which sizings to make different hand categories indifferent. It's all important stuff to be a strong player, to put your opponent always into tough spots. You need to know this kind of things. Again, this comes with training, with experience. So let's say he call, or let's say he raise, and then let's finish this up. We see that we don't re-raise that much, even 200 big blinds deep. If we re-raise, I think again that we put villain into a shitty spot. The thing is, if we start seeing now queens jacks folding, not sure. Here we come into a territory where I'm not totally sure how people will react. Probably that it can be possible that they start overfolding. Then if you re-raise here and you put a lot of pressure on river, I think they can end up overfolding. There are overpairs on the other side. You have perceived a lot of bluffs also, like 6-5, 4-5, 8-7, Ace-7, Ace-5. So that's why I'm not totally sure if people really overfold. So I wouldn't go too crazy here. Just play quite straight up, straightforward. You can just look at the re-raise. So they should never fold the overpair. And yeah, kinda natural. So always when something looks kinda natural, the reactions, I tend to not go for too crazy things. Just try to stay on the kinda GTO side, let's say. Okay, so let him call, and let's just quickly look over some turns and river scenarios, and then we finish up. So for example, ace club, you can stop always and make an estimation before you show the result. So ace of clubs or ace of diamonds, let's say, we have the options to bet, overbet, 3/4 and block bet, I think, on the turn. No, 3/4 and, no, sorry, here. Block, 3/4 overbet, yes. So you can just make an estimation, which frequency you bet, which sizings and how you construct your range, which value you want to keep barreling, and with which sizing, and which bluffs. So after you did that, you will look, okay, overbet is the right answer, and then we see, okay, we overbet some, like we start mixing things, we mix things up. We mostly barrel our diamonds, quite easy, to be honest, pretty easy. We say, okay, on an ace, on a king, on a queen, probably we need to be quite polarized then with our strategy, to use very big sizings. And for example, like if we look at the king, it should be kind of similar. kind of similar strategy. Oh, even 15% less betting because probably because yeah, we check, we don't we have quite a bit of ace x, not too many king x, but villain will have a lot of king x. So and villain has ace king. Villain has their advantage. We have ace queen off, king queen off not so often. All subtle things that can change this, make this 15% different. So we could simplify to just check range. So again, simplification. So a simple strategy would be just saying, okay, I check my range on the ace and on the king. Would be totally fine. If you not lock this, I think we don't lose too much EV doing that. Like in, yeah, we could go more in depth into how to find out like how much you lose, stuff like this, but that would take too much time for that video. So let's try out 7, let's say. Is it a good or a bad card for our range? Like you can stop again and make an estimation. So 7 is very good, of course. It connects very well. So I would expect even more betting, to be honest. But anyway, we can simplify to a 1/3 full range, because let's say if you bet 1/3, we can make again an estimation how much should villain raise against the 1/3. Probably he should be quite aggressive still, more aggro than I think people will be, just because people are kind of like too passive. I think people will react too passive with overpairs if they don't raise enough, or something like if they have some king jack in clubs or something like this, or king 10 in clubs, versus 1/3, a lot of weird hands get indifferent, let's say, and they need to start raising then. King jack clubs we don't have in the range, but yeah, I think yeah, you see, like queens, jacks, 10s need to raise, queen 10, this ace x, random ace x, ace 7. So a lot of races that you will not face. So if we remove the races, let's say, let's do the quick node lock. Let's make a sub 3 to make it faster. I will not explain now too much here. That's why I go quite fast, just to be able to show you before we end turn and like kind of like a blueprint of turn and river strategy, and then you have also something that you can implement. Block, node block, strategy, zack. Let's say you can even use the new function, strategy node block, and here we can adjust the percentage of the overall raises, all frequencies, all combos. It takes like all combos and raises just a bit less. Let's say before it was 10, let's make just 50% for now. So it was not 18, let's make it to 9. Okay, lock, lock, all, save and close, start 9, go, and now we get we can make an estimation. How much does it affect my strategy? Do we range block now or block very aggro? So now we see 11% check. So we can simplify the block range, not block range, because if he's not raising so often, why we should then play better small sizing with our nutted region. So depending on the strength of the opponent, how much he can catch, like kind of like when we play our hand, depending on that we size our hand. So if we play against a fish, we bomb the pot, like we want to build a pot against aces, kings, queens. Blocking would be a terrible mistake, and against someone who's very aware, when we bet big, we kind of tell him that we have a hand. Okay, so on that turn we could block range, and yeah, that's mostly it. I think there are not many different other turns, and anyway you can take the spot and solve it yourself. Try out to make a blueprint like this. Like I said, to look at turns and how to play rivers, to not spew off your money after you make like a exploit on the you simplify flop and turn. So you have a very simple strategy normally. Like you range donk, you can range donk, very efficient. You can range check or range bet on most turns. Maybe on a jack, on a queen, I would imagine it's splitting, and yeah, I think anyway we could donk a lot, like block a lot. General people tend to react very passive versus smaller, like very passive and overall when they have this nutted disadvantage. So you can keep this in mind. Okay, yeah, that's mostly it for that video. I can make a part 2. I will decide if I make a part 2 on that hand, or I will just move on with the next hand from my database. You can let me know in the comments how you like this series, if I should continue that one, and if you take value from it. And yeah, if you like the video, please leave a like, and yeah, subscribe to the channel to follow this yeah, the videos that I want to do now in the future. Okay, thank you for watching, and good luck on the tables.